Here we are. Here we are.
Amazing.
When we were talking earlier this week about like topics, how we would use the time in today's session, um, we decided on the CMO being the intended audience that this would address, and I agree because CMOs are like the catalyst for scaling companies today, growing them. And you've been addressing the concerns of CMOs, uh, and so I'd like to just turn the topic over. Just start off like let's talk about trends that CMOs are dealing with today that you see, and how AI could possibly serve them in traversing the zigzag motion that is required of the CMOs today. I know CMOs don't have jobs that last as long as in the olden days. They'd be at a company for 5 years, and that was like the norm, but not so much nowadays. Maybe you have some opinions about why that's the case.
Absolutely. I'd say there are two major trends I'm seeing today. The first thing I'm seeing, which is actually great for CMOs, is outbound is becoming harder than ever. And so I think in a lot of cases, you'll see your VP of sales, VP of marketing not getting along. VP of sales is just like, you know what? I'm going to take care of this myself. We're just going to brute force pipeline and do a ton of outbound. And that's how we're going to get this business from Series A to Series B or to whatever next stage you're really looking for. And that is becoming decreasingly effective. One of the topics I touched upon at that keynote at the AI user conference was just how much noise there is. So there's lots of trends moving towards it getting harder to talk to somebody one-on-one, essentially, especially if you're a stranger, especially if you're uninvited. You're not somebody that they really want to talk to. This includes most of your BDR teams or your SDR teams, essentially. And so there's more email than ever. There's more LinkedIn DMs than ever. There's more cold calling than ever. And so the question is, how do you really cut through this noise? And there are other macro trends that are also making outbound harder. Things like Google and other email providers essentially taking a stance and saying, hey, if your organization is sending a lot of email that happens to be going to spam, or you're going above a certain volume limit, we're going to start banning accounts. And so that went into effect 7 days ago, actually, with Google on their business domain. So across your company or across an organization, if you're sending, I'm looking on the exact numbers, but I think it's over like 3,000 emails per day. So if you have a small team of SDRs, you're probably going to hit that very quickly. And over 0.3% of them are going to spam. Say goodbye to your domain. So a lot of these changes are happening. And so where does that leave like your VP of sales? It's just like outbound in the old way is essentially less effective. And so the future of revenue right now is going to be more inbound driven. The role of sales is going to be, okay, how do we actually attract people to us? And then our BDRs, our SDRs, their job is just to close the loop. How do I just go that last mile? And I don't need a ton of email volume or cold call volume or LinkedIn DMs to like close people who are already pseudo engaged, already aware of what it is we do, already in market for a solution. But this puts a lot more emphasis on what the CMO needs to do, which is they really need to focus on smart inbound, driving qualified pipeline, or at least qualified traffic to their website, qualified traffic to their webinars, to their LinkedIn, to like wherever it is that your ICP lives, bringing in the right people who are ready to buy, and then being able to let sales kind of like close the loop over there. And so this is a positive trend for CMOs. The need for what they do is greater than ever. The second thing I'm seeing is just like people being harder on marketing than ever before. You mentioned how CMOs used to have 5-year tenures. I think CMOs have the shortest tenure of any C-suite exec. I think the average is like about 18 months. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, the economy started going south in 2023, and so we're not flush with venture capital in the same way we were back in the golden era, but we almost saw a decade of infinite capital coming our way since the last financial crisis till last year. Barring a couple of little dips, like capital was easy to come by. People were okay with turning on the faucets to run inefficient campaigns, even if like the ROI wasn't necessarily there. And so CMOs are under a lot of pressure right now to be able to grow that inbound in a way that's actually capital efficient. And so they have to think a little bit more carefully about how they want to do that. They have to think a little bit more carefully about how they want to think about timelines, right? So if you don't have all the capital in the world to just like spend a ton of money on paid acquisition, which has like maybe like well it's quite possible that the payback doesn't even like economically make sense, but you got leads in the door or pipeline in the moment. uh, at the same time, you don't have the runway to be doing a lot of like very fluffy, high level, top, like truly very top of funnel brand building type stuff. I'm not saying it's not important. It is very important, but you have to think about where you are as a business and what tool you need at the moment. And so I think a lot of CMOs really need to think about, okay, like what should I be doing right now? What is the right sequence of activities or campaigns I need to be focused on so that I can get a couple of early wins. I can prove that I can get pipeline in the door, and that gives me more runway so that I can work beyond 18 months to make sure that this company has like ultimately brand building, which is the only thing that like lasts in the long term. You can sure as hell count on every competitor copying any kind of unique feature that you have. And so just like being the go-to piece of software or product is the thing that's going to defend you long term. I think the other thing that CMOs have to contend with in this economy is that the structure of their team is also changing. We're seeing teams shrink. There are fewer specialists on their teams. There's more generalist marketers. So back in the day, you'd have a paid ad specialist, you'd have a content marketer, you'd have an SEO specialist, you'd have a field specialist, you'd have a lifecycle marketer, lots of roles, lots of different people.
Yeah, you'd have product managers and field
Yeah,
marketers and
it's just
product.
like we don't have the money for that headcount anymore. And instead, I think what's happening is companies are going to have generalist marketers, and their job is to really understand the customer, like truly understand the customer, really understand the market, understand the competitive landscape, and then delegate a lot of the specialist work to like fractional agencies or folks. And I think there's a whole sort of industry of that popping up right now. You have to be careful about how you work with them, the right people you choose. And then tooling. I think AI has made a lot of stuff that used to be esoteric knowledge or hard to do easy. And like that's where like products like us come in as well with Letter Drop. It's just we're telling people like, hey, put a smart person in the driver's seat, and then we'll take care of a lot of the other stuff in terms of how to actually operate with SEO or LinkedIn acquisition or like pull data from your sales calls or any of that kind of stuff. We'll take care of that for you. But it can only be as effective as you having a smart person in the driver's seat. Like you still need that really smart marketer on your team. And so I think whether you use tools or fractional work, you're going to arm your marketing team with that in order to be effective. So to recap, number one, inbound is the future of revenue. CMOs have a big role to play in that. Outbound is just getting less effective, or rather, like completely cold outbound is getting less effective. And trend two is there's much more scrutiny on marketing spend, and so CMOs have to be very smart about what they spend on and when, and how they think about team composition, given that money is no longer free.
Right, right. I was following this pretty closely in the recent past, last 12 months, and it seemed like the consultants that were helping business owners get a grip on their marketing spend, they would just, you know, help help cut off with face-to-face conferences. That was the going thing for the low-hanging fruit for saving money. Is like, why are we doing this? What are the business outcomes which can be linked to these conferences that cost a lot of money? And how can we make better use of the money that's coming in? And so, are you still finding that to be the case today in February of 2024? Do you see other things that are more prominent as low hanging fruit? Maybe that fruit's off the tree already, and now we're coming full circle to other things. Um, has have you seen anything with respect to like marketers that are the scrutiny of the budget? It's like how is that unfolding today in terms of getting more with the same or less headcount?
Yeah, so I'd say the number one thing that you see most marketing teams pulling back on is like paid acquisition. It's just one of those things where if you're not careful, like you can truly burn a hole in your wallet. So it's definitely paid acquisition, which saw like the biggest drawback. There's still a room for paid. There's a lot of room for paid. I'm not saying that paid is bad by any means. I just think a lot of people were using paid in a way that was never meant to be used. And so, or like very inefficiently. So
Right,
definitely
they're
that.
spackling over holes in their plan.
Yeah, essentially. So like if we throw enough money at it and get in front of enough people, like somebody's bound to book a demo.
Yep,
Um,
just throw it on the wall, spackle it in. The
basically,
holes will be
basically.
covered.
Um, And then I'd say like events also can be very expensive. I think if you run an event poorly, like I was at SaaStr last year, and the number of companies where I saw these booths, unmanned booths, or there were these companies which just were handing out like swag and t-shirts to people, and all they did was like all you had to do was like like sign in or like put in your email or like scan the QR code and they'd give you whatever. There was no qualification. There was no process of education. And I was like, okay, like this defeats the purpose of the conference. I think the goal is to be telling people about like what it is that you stand for, the types of problems you solve, how that's impacting them. It's not to just like collect an email address from somebody who might not even be in your ICP at all. And so I think yes, like people cut out a lot of that stuff because they were being done efficiently. The TLDR is like all marketing, like every marketing activity when done right can be very effective. I think a lot of companies just like don't do them right is the net of it. And so I think when things start heading south, people have this knee-jerk reaction to be like, let's like look at the biggest spend items, budget items, paid events, and let's just like, cut them out straight up. Let's just cut them out. And it's not really a solution. Like you cut out the spend, but also like where are you going to get a pipeline from now, right? And so I think companies need to go back to basics. They need to think about, okay, do we really understand our customer? Do we really understand like where they're hanging out, either in person or online? Do we really understand like what their problems are? Do we understand who they trust? And let's like rethink our entire go-to-market in terms of and be like customer centric about it, essentially. Like work backwards from the customer as opposed to being like, let's show up at SaaStr. The only thing that's common about SaaStr is that these companies are SaaS companies. There's nothing else about SaaStr. Like I don't, there's no audience. At least Pavilion, you know, like, okay, it's CROs and CMOs. And if you sell sales or MarTech, maybe it makes sense to go. With something like SaaStr, it's just like everybody and their mom is there, and you're asking yourself, like, was this an effective? Was this effective? And I'm sure like you can make it effective, but I think people need to be much more nuanced about how they approach things. Also with paid, the number of times I see ads in my feed across platforms, LinkedIn, whatever, which are just completely irrelevant to me. Like I'm not the right buyer by a long shot. And I'm thinking to myself, this company is spending money on some sort of agency or in-house person who doesn't know how to tweak the knobs and is paying LinkedIn money to get these pretty bad ads. It's just a line of text and a button. And they all say something like sufficiently vague about like 10x your revenue or something like that, and put it in front of me, and they're paying money to get in front of me. And I'm just like, yes, this is just like inefficient spend. And so I think companies aren't, it's not that they should be just cutting back on budget, it's that they need to like rethink what they should be spending money on. You do need to spend money to make money. There's no way around that. But I think companies need to be very careful about how they think about things. And previously they were just spending money on everything because they could afford to, and they really can't anymore. Slash, they really never could, but they didn't deal with the repercussions. It was like somebody many years down the road who would deal with those issues.
Right. So let's say we were talking with a CMO that recognized the problem with their spend and their inefficiencies with their outbound and their paid, and they want to put it they want to put a new business plan in place or go in a new direction, one which relies on inbound sales motions, one that recognizes the importance of marketing and sales working cohesively together. And um, how would that look to you? What kind of best practices or lessons learned have you um, harvested from your efforts lately that you want to share or that you're ready to share? Any?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I've been really thinking about lately is sales marketing alignment, and actually thinking about creating flywheels in your go-to-market motion. How do you get your go-to-market motion to start building on top of itself? The problem with a lot of things which are one-off expenses or one-off customer acquisition channels is like you pay for it, it works in the moment, and then that's it. Like you get no value from it again. And I think more companies should be thinking about how all these pieces kind of like work together. How do I repurpose an event, or how do I, for example, we did a sponsorship. We got a LinkedIn post, we got a newsletter. It did wonders for us in terms of driving customer acquisition or like demos for us. And then we're like, you know what? Like, why did we stop there with that one sponsorship? Like, let's turn that into a LinkedIn thought leader ad and like promote the hell out of it. We know it worked once, like let's just make it happen again. And so I think a lot of people are not really thinking about how do I just like juice the things that are working. But going back to flywheels, and I'll present my screen to you at this point because I do have a
Yeah,
deck
go
that I
for it.
think might be relevant.
While you're
Is
doing that, I wanted to also just pile on another layer here that I think is really interesting, and it might be related to what you're showing here. In your demo, I was looking at the shows, the visits that people were making to your company's webpage on LinkedIn. And it was like 2,800 website viewers or viewers on your page. And based on how you approach things, I could tell like this is intentional. You've got people that are coming to you uh, that you want there, and the ICP is aligned, and the number is 2,800. So I thought, well, geez, what if I was a typical sales leader, and my BDRs or my SDRs or BDM folks are looking at 200 views and that come to their site. And so, is there a pathway or some gotchas or lesson learned to get from 200 to 2,800?
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I think a lot of people are just, and I appreciate you putting this webinar together. What you're essentially doing is like in many ways is like this is marketing. Like what we're doing right now, this is marketing, right? And I think fundamentally a lot of companies, a lot of people I talk to are afraid of putting themselves out there. They're afraid of having conversations. They're afraid of talking about the core problems. And so it's easy to hide behind an ad with some text on it, or it's easy to hire an expensive agency to make a video for you. Guess what sells? It's like authentic, real conversations from people who've been there, done that, have been in your shoes before, and have a way to solve your problems. And I think more people need to think about that. And I think to your point, like, yeah, let's talk about how people can get all that sort of aligned. So I'm just gonna breeze through this very quick, but
Yeah.
this is kind of what we talked about, right? It's just like people spamming people. It's just like, okay, let's do a lot of outbound, throw a bunch of people into Outreach or Apollo, drop them in a sequence, and then whatever comes out of it comes out of it. And then a lot of companies will be like, okay, let's use some AI, let's personalize these emails. Does nominally better. You have triggers, you have all these things that you can improve conversion. That's great. But you're still fundamentally doing outbound. You're still fundamentally reaching out to people on very crowded channels. And so that's still problematic. And so then what a lot of companies will try doing is, okay, let's throw paid on it so we get some inbound. Once again, we just talk about all these problems with paid is like if you don't know what you're doing, it's incredibly expensive. It's a great way to just like burn your budget unless you're careful.
And if you're doing
And
email campaigns, like you mentioned before, in the wake of the new rules on Google, you're blowing out your domain or you're blowing out the domain.
exactly, you can't be sending that much email anymore.
Yep.
Um, And maybe there's some like perverse incentives here where like companies like LinkedIn and Google want you to spend on ads. And so they're limiting your ability to like direct outreach to people. That's a separate conversation, but that's there as well. And so I think most companies just stop here. Like this is truly all they do. You know, like we're gonna go hard in terms of setting up like a big BDR, SDR team, have them do a bunch of outbound. We're gonna have our demand gen team run a ton of ads, and that's it. This is how we do it. Most capital inefficient thing ever, right? Because you have to pay for all that headcount. You have to think about like what is the payback on every demo or opportunity your BDRs and SDRs are booking. But think about like the CAC payback on all those ads you're spending on. And so this is like the era of this is essentially in many ways over. And so I think a lot of companies need to think about, okay, like, and the way I place these here is very intentional. I'm trying to show you like how you can build a flywheel here. But essentially, like I think companies need to start thinking about organic a lot more. And organic can take a lot of forms. It's like newsletters. It's like this type of webinar. It's like posting on LinkedIn. It's like your website content. It's resources, playbooks, guides, like whatever you want. Just tell the world like what's out there. Heck, before this conversation, you were learning from Lauren, one of our customers, about PLG SEO. That's just something that we're a resource we're putting out into the world so that people can self-educate themselves. And so I think these companies, more companies need to be doing this, talking with their customers, sharing customer stories, educational content. And you need to be doing this both in push and pull. So push is things like LinkedIn, your newsletter, and then pull is stuff like SEO. And I mean, when I say SEO, I mean actually creating useful content. I think a lot SEO is a dirty word where a lot of people think SEO is just like defining, writing these garbage articles on like what is X or something along those lines. But I think there is a lot of opportunity for like thoughtful SEO. For example, I was looking into how to like think about comp structure for our AE recently. Couldn't find anything good online, and I thought to myself, hey, if there was a company that sold to sales leaders or founders with building sales teams, this would be a great piece of content for them to have on their website because I would be on their website. I'd be now educated about their product. If only somebody would actually bother to actually create that great guide, thoughtful guide on how to company doesn't exist. Um, and so you have organic. I think this is where sales and marketing need to start working together. So now I think once you have good product marketing, you really understand your buyer. That translates into good content marketing. So you can kind of do this at scale. You can create the right webinars, newsletters, blog posts, what you have, whatever have you. And then you need to actually get your sales team to be using these assets and resources. If your sales team just continues to like blanket people with what I showed you earlier, there's no point. Like you have sales and marketing acting independently. And so what you really need to do is turn your sales team into social sellers. So get all that content that your marketing team is producing, get your sales team to be using that, get them to be posting that on their accounts, get them to be having thoughtful conversations and showing up as consultants, as thought leaders that your prospects want to connect with. And so now when your BDR cold calls somebody, they don't swear at them and hang up. Instead, they're like, you know what? Like I follow you on LinkedIn. You have a lot of great stuff. I'll hear you out for a minute. That's actually something that happens to Ryan, our BR. He tells me this all the time. It's just like, partly since I started social selling and putting stuff out there, people respect me more. People want to talk to me more because they think I can actually solve their problems. Um, and so we need to get sales teams to actually be sharing this type of thought leadership content, sharing like helpful resources, both in their outbound as well as into the world on like platforms like LinkedIn or honestly wherever your ICP lives. And so you're starting to see this flywheel. You're starting to see how the content is coming, making its way back into sales. And I think the last part of this puzzle is intent data. And I know intent data has a lot of bad connotations to it, and that's because people are looking at like third-party intent data from like Bumbora or other platforms. But I think there is value in trying to understand, okay, like who is actually engaging with my LinkedIn posts, who's visiting my website, what are they consuming, and how do I understand or how do I build a profile on this account based on like what they consume, and how do I use that in terms of the other types of content I recommend to them? How do I use that in terms of the ads that I show them? How do I use that in terms of the content my sales team or messaging my sales team uses when I reach out to them? And so that's going to help you drop your conversion rate or like increase your conversion rate on outbound. It also means your sales team has to reach out to fewer people because you have those limits. You can't be reaching out to everybody anymore. So how do they reach out to fewer people who are in market, who are driven already to engage with you because you put out these lures through content? How are you going to figure out what other content should I produce based on like what has previously worked, what previously drove revenue? How do I create more of that? And then finally, how do I actually make like pull back my ad spend and make sure that it's effective ad spend and not wasting time money on like things which are ineffective, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, so that I spend more of my budget on people who are in market, already consuming stuff, already engaging with our webinars, with our blog posts, with whatever we're putting out there. And so what you end up with is this flywheel of organic, sales, paid, all working together and building on top of each other, as opposed to all of them kind of operating independently. And this is, I think, the foundation for a scalable go-to-market where you can actually be more capital efficient, as opposed to a go-to-market where you're just doing kind of like dumb outbound or dumb ad spend and then praying and hoping for the best, and nothing really builds on top of each other.
You've outlined a great example of cutting through the noise. In the beginning of our conversation today, you said this is one of the big challenges for marketers is cutting through the noise. And it's very clear that, to me at least, that these are really the principles for a strategy that are going to serve you well. And I thought about a couple of things that we've probably all thought about in our past. Um, and I can't think of the names of them right now, but it'll come to me and then I'll bring it up. Another thing you mentioned was authentic. You said that, and that word jumped at me because the reticulating activating system. I'm attuned to what makes a content authentic, and how can what happened to that BDR that you described, who's having meaningful conversations with people that recognize his expertise, um, and um, part of it is being vulnerable. I think that the main theme underlying what we mean by authentic is someone who's vulnerable and putting themselves out there for first of all, but not and the other thing it reminds me of is I bought the book from Satya Nadella when he published Hit Refresh.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about the culture that needed to change at Microsoft. And I used to work at Microsoft, the Blue Badger myself, when Steve Ballmer was running things. And when Satya Nadella took over, the company culture was a know-it-all culture. And Satya said, we're going to move to a learn-it-all culture. And fast forward, the valuation of the company and the positioning are better now than ever. I mean, it was $27 stock and now it's 400. So something's right with that. And I think it goes back to the two things that I said, the culture of learn it all and being vulnerable as a component of authentic, which is very attractive in what we're looking for and cuts through the noise. So it's your voice certainly cuts through the noise for me. I'm glad that you could join me on this web chat, my fireside chat series. And I do believe that there will be people that find this conversation in the future that are looking for answers in this respect. They're going on this journey and will find some value. And hopefully that will be good for us too, that we help someone and that they can help themselves. Um, and just as a footnote, you mentioned that SEO is a dirty word, and something else, intent. Those those are those are like holy grails for me. They're not dirty words. So, uh, uh, and I'm pretty sure that our audience believes the same. I'm a follower of people like Rand Fishkin, who was the creator of Moz Rank, and he's on to something now. I don't know if you've heard seen any of his recent stuff. I almost subscribed. I was kicking the tires. Spark Toro, and I thought that was very interesting. Rand's new getup, his new path, and so it's not. This is like totally valuable. SEO is not a dirty word.
Absolutely. I think as with everything, like look, every channel, everything works when it's treated with respect and done properly. I think everything get everything things started becoming a dirty word when people started abusing them.
Yes.
Yes, which is why when I say cold email, it's a dirty word, or cold calling. Why is cold calling a dirty word? It's just someone trying to who, if someone reaches out to me and they can genuinely help me out, I'm not open. I'm pretty open to a conversation. I'm very nice to like SDRs and BDRs who cold call me. I'm like, hey, like you have a minute to pitch me, shoot your shot, and then it's all good. I understand the game. And as long as they're thoughtful about it, as long as like I'm not just another name on a list, they've done their research. I'm like, thank you for educating me on something. The problem is when people are just like, honestly, like, punching numbers and like, hey, like, what do you want? Blah, blah, blah. They start swearing at each other. It becomes very annoying. They know
Yeah.
nothing about you. That's why people associate cold calling, cold email with spam because it's been abused. And the same thing is happening to a lot of stuff in marketing as well. I think enough people get into it. You have enough bad actors. People try to do things at scale poorly. I tell my BDR this like Ryan, like you need to figure out the fundamentals first. Do things properly at a small volume before you scale it up, because otherwise you're just going to suck at scale. And he keeps playing that back to me now. He says, suck the part that I don't want to suck at scale. I'm like, good, Ryan, that's great. And so, yeah, I think that's how we got into this situation. I'm really hoping that 2024 is a reset for a lot of people. They see the opportunity is cheaper than ever to create noise. And so the people who I think are going to succeed are the ones who are able to pull back from that and say, like, you know what, I'm going to be pretty principled about this. And I'm going to do the right activities at the right time, right moment, instead of spraying and praying.
Right. And it's and with AI on it, there's an opportunity to spray and pray in mass on scale and dig a deeper hole for yourself. And that's why I think we're on the right track here with the principles that you outlined at the keynote speech. Very cool. It's going to serve us well. We're all just on a journey, right? We're going to use it in our research. Our SEO is going to get better. The relevant conversations that we have are going to be more frequent with less effort, and we can just also amplify the sales enablement piece of it works based on your recommendations too for AI usage. Repurpose content. Long form can be repurposed in a more consumable way, and recommendations. helping people that are on the front lines, the SDRs and the frontline management. So those are very interesting hot topics for me, which we'll have to. We don't have any more time today to talk about to go into depth, but we will be talking about those in the series, the future editions. So stay tuned and circle back. And we're out of time today, but it's really great that you came and we had this conversation. And I hope we can continue the conversation offline or online in future days. So thanks, Parthi.
Thank you for having me, Doug. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, I just turned the recorder off. We're done on the
Amazing.
recording part, and it was great. I mean, real conversation on world class structure, and I can't wait to put it into consumable form for reconsumption. So my intention to take these recordings and put it on my YouTube channel, and leave it available for you to do what if you want to do something to refer back to it.
Absolutely.
Any feedback for me? Comments, suggestions?
No, I think this was good. I think this is technically supposed to have like maybe a live audience, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
so I have to find that. I have to
You have to find that still. Yeah. So what I would recommend is you also, I don't know if you have to promote these, so like syncing it up to like a LinkedIn like webinar, live audience. I think that will help you get a couple of people in the door. And then what you could do is you do maybe 20 minutes, half an hour with the speaker, and then you maybe do 5 or 10 minutes at the end for questions. But you need to make sure like, okay, like you have enough people in the audience. I think if it's too small, like you'll get like these random people coming in and asking you weird questions. And yeah, but I think you could better amplify this by hooking it up to like the LinkedIn audience network, and then people will just join.
But I wanted to do it on Luma for this phase because I'm still figuring out the logistics of doing it, being a
Right.
host for that. And so it's building up for the LinkedIn platform, really.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure, Doug. I'm sure I'll see you around at one of these dinners in the city at some point. But yeah,
Very cool. And if you've got like some ideas, I'm going to look more deeper on Letter Drop. Um, it's totally. Um, it just feels right because it's very. Talking to one of the founders. But it's the content strategy. So would you? I'm going to put you on my. I've got a Substack on content strategy, so I think you probably could give me some opines on that or comment.
yeah, absolutely. More than happy to.
Thank you, good sir.